Captain Elias Ward stood in the grand ceremonial hall of Cerelia Prime, wearing a dark silver suit stitched with Earth's insignia and the golden threads of the Ilari Dominion. The twin suns poured warm, golden light through the crystal ceiling, casting slow-moving shadows on the polished floor as alien dignitaries from dozens of star systems watched in silence. Before him stood Princess Sailari, the heir to the Ilari throne, her shimmering gown glowing with a faint energy and her skin reflecting subtle hues of starlight. She was beautiful, graceful, and quiet, with violet eyes that never looked afraid, only thoughtful. This was not just a wedding. It was a treaty written in flesh and vows. Humanity had only recently joined the Galactic Council, and this union was the price and promise of peace between Earth and one of the most powerful empires in known space. Elias had agreed, not just as a soldier-turned-diplomat, but as someone who believed in unity beyond bloodlines. He had met the princess only 3 times before the ceremony, each meeting brief, careful, and full of formality. She was polite, intelligent, and distant, always choosing her words like each one carried weight. Now, as the high priest of the Ilari spoke in a language older than human memory, Elias couldn't stop thinking that something was off. It wasn't her silence or her strange aura. It was the way she looked at him, like she was waiting. For what, he couldn't guess. The vows were spoken. The binding light formed a ring around their joined hands, and the people applauded. That night they were escorted to the Sky Dome Tower, a private palace floating above the clouds of Cerelia. Inside there was peace and silence, just the two of them surrounded by soft light, artificial starlight on the ceiling, and a soft breeze flowing through open glass doors. Sailari did not remove her ceremonial crown or speak for several minutes. She only watched Elias. As he poured 2 glasses of the clear blue nectar they called a gift drink among the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, not louder, not softer, but deeper in meaning. "Captain Ward," she said, her tone both calm and sharp, "before this night ends, you must know the truth." Elias lowered the glass, all thoughts of peace treaties and political strategy slipping from his mind. "What truth?" he asked, his voice steady. She walked toward the open window and looked out over the floating towers, the light of distant moons glowing across her silver gold. "Here? I am not who they told you I am," she said. "I am not what the Ilari believe me to be." Her skin shimmered, not with light, but with something deeper, like her entire body was a mask made of stars. Elias stepped forward, unsure whether this was a test or a warning. "Then who are you?" he asked. She turned slowly, and her eyes, those deep violet eyes, were no longer the same. They glowed with rings of shifting blue and white, like tiny galaxies, spinning behind her pupils. "I waited until now because the bond ceremony makes us more than allies," she said. "It links our minds, our futures. You had to see me through more than politics." Elias felt the hair on his neck rise. The room grew colder, not physically, but emotionally, as if the space around them knew something was changing. "I don't understand," he said. "Are you not Ilari?" She smiled faintly. "I am Ilari, but not just Ilari. I am what they fear, what they hid, what they lied to you about when they proposed this alliance." Her voice held no anger, only a deep sadness. "There is a power in our bloodline, a gift from the ones who came before us. but I carry more of it than they ever intended. The Empress knew. She swore to keep me hidden. This marriage was her way of binding me, keeping me safe and silent. Elias felt like the room was spinning, not from fear, but from the weight of her words. "Why tell me now?" he asked. She moved closer, standing only inches from him. "Because now we are bound. Your mind will sense mine. I can no longer hide what I am. And because," she paused, her voice a whisper, "something is coming, something that wants what I carry. And now they will come for you too." Elias stared at her, unsure what to say, unsure if the world outside the window was still the same. He had come here to be a diplomat, a symbol of peace. But now he stood next to a woman who claimed to carry a secret older than his species, a secret that had waited until this very night to speak. Outside, the stars blinked gently, unaware or perhaps waiting, too. And far beneath the floating palace, something shifted in the shadows. Something had just learned that the princess had revealed herself. Captain Elias Ward stood frozen, still trying to understand what Princess Sailari had just told him. Her eyes no longer looked human or even fully Ilari. They shimmered with layers of light, deep and ancient, as if galaxies spun quietly behind them. The glow from her skin was fading into something darker, like the color of midnight skies touched with starlight. She walked toward the far end of the room, where a small panel lit up under her touch, revealing a secret compartment hidden in the wall. Inside it was a crown, unlike the ceremonial one she had worn during the wedding. This one was made of thin, floating rings that hovered in place, each spinning slowly with symbols Elias couldn't read. "This," she said quietly, "is the true crown of Ilari. Not the symbol of rule, but the lock to something far older." Elias stepped closer, his curiosity now stronger than his confusion. Sailari explained that thousands of years ago, before the Ilari were united, they were guided by beings called the Precursors, ancient life forms, who shaped the early paths of many species across the stars. The Precursors left behind a system called the Weave, a kind of mental and spatial network that could connect thoughts, locations, even time. Over generations, knowledge of the Weave had been lost, hidden, and finally erased from official records. But Sailari had been born with a genetic marker, a rare trait that let her sense pieces of the Weave, especially when close to certain relics like the real crown. Her family knew, and they feared what it meant. To protect her, they created a lie. She was a normal princess, delicate and loyal. Her marriage to Elias was not only a peace treaty, it was a cage. As she spoke, Elias listened carefully, the weight of her truth slowly sinking in. It explained her distant looks, the way she measured her words, the flicker of sadness he saw even during the ceremony. But before he could ask more, the floor beneath them trembled. The lights flickered once, then dimmed. A sharp alarm echoed. Through the sky dome, Sailari's face went pale. "They've found us," she whispered. The Obsidian Vor. Elias had heard of them only in passing, ruthless, silent mercenaries who worked for credits and secrets, rumored to be older than many star empires. They weren't just hired killers. They were collectors of rare tech, relics, and sometimes bloodlines. If they were here, they weren't after him. They were here for her. The room's glass walls darkened as emergency shields slid into place. Sailari grabbed the crown and opened another panel, revealing a hidden passage. Without a word, they ran into the darkness, the soft hum of sensors guiding their way. Behind them, the dome shook again. Something or someone had broken through. The tunnel was long and curved downward deeper than Elias expected. Along the walls were faded carvings, symbols that shimmered. Faintly when Selari passed by, she explained in a whisper that the passage had been built by her great-grandmother, one of the last Ilari to believe in the weave's existence. At the end of the tunnel was a small chamber. In the center stood a tall, silent structure shaped like a door, but made of no metal Elias had ever seen. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heartbeat. Selari approached it slowly, placed the crown into a cradle beside it, and turned to Elias. "This is the fracture gate," she said. "It leads to the vault, the heart of the weave. I cannot activate it alone. It requires a second mind, one outside the Ilari bloodline. Human minds are unlinked to the weave's old code. You are the key, Elias." Before he could respond, the chamber's ceiling cracked. A metallic spike burst through, followed by glowing red sensors scanning the room. Elias pulled Selari back, just in time as the spike exploded in sparks. The Vor were here. He turned to the gate. "What do I need to do?" She reached out and took his hand, placing it on the surface of the structure. The door lit up instantly, swirling with light and voice-like whispers. The temperature dropped as the chamber filled with mist. Without warning, the floor beneath them fell away, not with weight, but with gravity itself turning inside out. They were pulled through light, space folding around them like silk. When Elias opened his eyes again, they were standing in an impossible place, a massive, endless chamber filled with moving architecture. Walls shifted like thoughts. Lights blinked like memories. Time felt slower, stretched. They had entered the vault. Elias couldn't breathe at first, not from lack of air, but from the overwhelming sense that this place wasn't just old. It was awake. The vault didn't need words. It felt their arrival. It reacted to Elias in ways Selari couldn't predict. Paths opened as he moved, doors unfolded when he questioned them in his mind. The weave was learning from him. She explained in awe that no Ilari had ever been accepted by the vault like this. Perhaps humanity, new to the stars, still carried something the weave trusted: adaptability, curiosity, or something older. As they moved deeper, following glowing lines on the floor that reacted to Elias's thoughts, Selari shared that the vault's center held a crystal seed that powered the weave. If activated, it could link species across galaxies, share peace through empathy, or destroy entire networks if corrupted. Before they could reach it, they heard footsteps. Somehow, impossibly, someone else had entered the vault. A tall figure stepped from a mirrored doorway, her silhouette royal, familiar, and dangerous. It was the Empress Selari's mother. She had followed them through the broken gate, and the look in her eyes wasn't relief, it was resolve. Elias stepped in front of Selari instinctively. The vault shifted around them as tension filled the air. The Empress didn't shout. Her voice was cold and calm. "You were never meant to open this place," she told her daughter. "Your power was to be sealed, not awakened." Selari stood tall, but Elias could feel her heart pounding. "I won't let you use the weave for control," she said. "I won't be your pawn." The vault pulsed once, as if listening. The Empress stepped closer. "And you," she said to Elias, don't understand what you're unlocking. Humanity is not ready for this. Your species still fights over water and land. The weave could destroy you." Elias met her gaze without flinching. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe that's exactly why it chose us." The vault pulsed again. Lights brightened. The crystal seed in the chamber ahead flickered to life. Choices had been made. The gate had been opened, and nothing would ever be the same again. The vault trembled with a strange hum as Captain Elias Ward stood between Princess Sailari and her mother, the Empress unsure if the ground itself would hold much longer beneath their feet. The glowing walls pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats, and the great chamber of shifting metal and light seemed to listen, to judge, to wait. The Empress took a step forward, her long silver robe flowing like liquid starlight, and though her voice was calm, there was a sharp edge beneath it as she told Elias that the vault should have never been opened, that the weave had ruined empires before, that it didn't bring peace, it brought control, and only those prepared to use it with strength could survive its influence. Sailari stood firm, her hand near Elias's arm, not touching but close enough to feel his presence, and she said the weave was not meant to rule minds or break wills, but to link and uplift, to help species understand each other and evolve. Walt's light shifted again, a thin beam of white shining down on a path that opened behind them, revealing a long hallway made of energy, walls covered in moving patterns like ancient writing rearranging itself. Suddenly the vault shook with a deep groan, and the floor behind them split open in a flash of red light. The obsidian Vor had entered. Tall, silent, and covered in jagged black armor, they moved like shadows with purpose, holding weapons that hummed with plasma heat. Elise grabbed Sailari's hand, and they ran down the glowing hallway as the Empress shouted commands behind them, her own guards turning to hold off the intruders. The hallway seemed endless, bending and twisting, opening rooms that blinked, in and out of place, but the vault guided them, leading them forward with soft pulses of light and low melodic hums like a song only the brave could hear. At last they reached a circular room in the center of the structure, where a massive sphere of crystal floated above a pillar, suspended by nothing, spinning slowly in the air like a planet caught in orbit. It was the core of the vault, the heart of the weave. Sailari stepped forward, holding the real crown in both hands, and began to whisper in a language Elias didn't recognize, the sound both musical and strange, like voices layered across time. The vault responded, casting lines of energy across the floor, forming patterns that glowed beneath Elias's feet as if testing him again. Sailari turned to him, her face serious, and told him this was the moment. If he chose to connect, the vault would open fully, but it could not be undone. He hesitated only a second before placing his hand on the core, and the moment he touched it, his mind was pulled into a different place, a space of light, memory, and thought. He saw flashes of Earth, its wars and beauty, people struggling, learning, loving, building. Then he saw stars, worlds he didn't know, leaves unlike anything human, all trying to find the same thing, purpose, peace, connection. The weave showed him choices made across time, some leading to ruin, others to greatness, but always shaped by those willing to risk the unknown. When he opened his eyes, the core glowed brighter, and the vault accepted the union, not of species or bloodlines, but of choice and trust. But before they could speak, the floor cracked open, and the Vor dropped in, weapons raised, their leader stepping through in a cloak made of some dark, smoky material, his voice mechanical and cold. He declared that the vault belonged to no empire, no council, no single race. It belonged to those strong enough to take it. Selari stepped forward unafraid and said that the vault had already chosen, not through power, but through understanding. The Vir leader laughed and raised his arm, a signal to fire, but before the blast came, the vault reacted on its own. Energy surged from the walls, wrapping around Elias and Selari, lifting them slightly off the ground as symbols circled them in rings of light. The Vor's weapons jammed, the room darkened, and a deep voice not human or Hilari spoke from all directions. It said the vault was awake again, and that no one could take it by force. With a flash, the core sent out a wave of light that swept through the chamber like a tide. The Vor fell to their knees, their armor sparking, their minds overwhelmed by images they could not understand. When the light faded, only silence remained. Selari lowered the crown, and Elias stepped forward. The vault opened a path back, a soft white arch of energy that led to the original fracture gate. But as they walked, Elias looked back and saw the Empress still standing at the edge, her face unreadable. She said nothing, but her eyes followed him, not with anger, but something closer to fear, or perhaps hope. They stepped through the gate, the vault sealing behind them like a closing eye, and emerged back into the hidden chamber beneath the palace. The city above was quiet, but the stars outside seemed brighter. Selari turned to Elias and said that the weave was now bonded to both of them, not as rulers, but as guides. They had to decide how much of it to share, and with whom. Elias knew their lives would never be the same. The secrets they carried were too powerful, too dangerous, but also too full of potential to be buried. Somewhere out there others would come searching. But now the weave had a voice, and that voice came not from the halls of power, but from two people who had simply chosen to trust each other in a moment when everything could have fallen apart. And though the war was not over, the path had begun. The vault stood silent again. But Elias could feel it breathing beneath his feet like a sleeping giant slowly waking. And though they had passed through the fracture gate, once already, the chamber they entered now was different, darker, deeper, alive in ways that defied reason. The air felt thick with thought, the walls hummed softly, and each step they took echoed with a strange delay, as if time itself paused to listen. Selari held the true crown close to her chest, her eyes scanning every surface, every flicker of light, while Elias tried to calm the unease building in his chest, the sense that they were being watched not by guards or machines, but by the vault itself. Around them, tall spires of shifting crystal pulsed gently, and narrow bridges led to floating islands of stone that rotated slowly in midair, like pieces of a forgotten puzzle waiting to be solved. This was the true vault, not just a control chamber, but a living archive, the brain and memory of the weave, holding data and power too dangerous for any one species to control. As they crossed a bridge that curved sideways like a spiral, Elias noticed strange symbols rising from the surface, forming glowing words he couldn't read, but which Selari translated in whispers. Here lies what was once too great to hold. At the far end, a new chamber opened with a hiss. revealing a wide platform lit by a soft beam from above, and in the center stood a pedestal with a device shaped like a star, 5 pointed edges, each one pulsing with its own color, and in the middle a keyhole. Selari explained that this was the conduit core, the heart of the vault's power and its deepest secret. The crown was not just a key, it was also a filter, something that let the right mind speak to the vault without going mad. The conduit would allow the user to access the weave fully, to connect thoughts and memories across light years, but only if the vault allowed it. She handed Elias a small disk and told him the vault had already accepted his mind once. It might do so again. He approached the pedestal, but as he reached out, the room trembled violently, and from the shadows stepped a figure neither of them expected. General Koran, the Empress's most loyal war leader, thought lost during the early battles with the Vur. His armor was damaged, scorched and twisted, and his left eye flickered with cybernetic light. He raised his weapon slowly, not aiming, just watching. "You should not be here," he said, voice cracked and low. "This place has chosen many before you. None were ready." Selari stepped forward and demanded to know how he had entered, how he had survived, but Koran only shook his head. "The vault saved me," he said, "or trapped me. I don't know anymore. I have seen too much, heard too many voices." He pointed to the conduit. "If you activate it without understanding its weight, it will tear the galaxy apart. The weave does not care about peace. It wants to be used." Elias kept his eyes on Koran, trying to read the truth behind his broken words. Selari whispered that she had read old records of early explorers. Many who entered the deeper vaults had vanished or returned changed, unable to sleep, always hearing whispers. But Elias wasn't afraid. He stepped forward and placed a disk into the slot. At first, nothing happened. Then the air turned cold, and a sharp wind blew through the chamber, carrying sounds from across the stars, laughter, screams, music, silence. A pulse of light shot upward, and suddenly they were floating, the chamber spinning slowly around them, as the vault opened itself fully for the first time in centuries. Images flashed through the air, ancient cities made of light, battles lost and won, stars being born. Selari gasped as one memory touched her mind, a vision of the Alari homeworld, long before her ancestors ruled it, green and wild, untouched by technology. Elias saw Earth too, not as it was, but as it could be, clean, unified, driven by something more than fear. The conduit began to speak in their minds, its voice neither male nor female, but steady and old. It said that the weave had waited for connection, not control, and now that they had opened it, choices would ripple across time. But before the message could finish, Koran shouted and fired into the pedestal. Sparks flew, and the light dimmed. Elias was thrown back, landing hard, while Selari screamed as the crown rolled away from her grasp. Koran staggered, holding his head, shouting that the vault was lying, that it had tricked him for years with dreams and false hopes. Elias crawled toward the pedestal as it sparked and hissed, the conduit dimming fast, and without thinking, he reached out and grabbed the crown. It burned his skin, but he didn't let go. He slammed it back into place, and the vault screamed a long, rising sound that shook the entire platform. The conduit reignited brighter than before, and this time it spoke only to Elias. It showed him not just images, but pathways, futures that branched like trees, some full of light, others dark and broken. He saw himself as a leader or a traitor, or forgotten. He saw Sailari as a queen who brought unity or as a ghost who failed. Then he saw a third path, one that did not follow control or surrender, but balanced guiding without ruling, sharing without forcing. Elias chose that path, and the light faded. He opened his eyes and found the vault silent again. Koran was gone, vanished in the last surge. Sailari helped Elias to his feet, her hands shaking. The conduit remained whole, but the vault had closed itself once more, leaving behind only a faint glow and the crown, now dark. Elias said he felt something change, like a part of him had been left inside the vault, and Sailari nodded, saying the weave now lived through them. It was no longer just a system, but a seed planted in their choices. As they stepped back onto the bridge, the paths behind them closed. The vault would not open again easily, but it didn't need to. What had been awakened would spread slowly through thoughts, through trust, through small acts of courage. And as they looked toward the stars beyond the palace walls, they knew their journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. The stars over Ilari Prime glowed cold and distant as Elias and Sailari returned to the surface, stepping out from the ancient vault chamber into a city still unsure of its future, the air tense with whispers and half-truths. For though the crown was now silent and the vault closed, word had already begun to spread that something had changed, something deeper than war or peace. Something the old powers could not control, and in that silence fear began to grow. The Empress had vanished. Her guards claimed illness or retreat, but some believed she had fled, ashamed or afraid of what the vault had revealed. Others claimed she had been consumed by it. No one could say for certain, but the Ilari high houses gathered in secret chambers, arguing over who now held power. The Vur retreated into the shadows, their threat not forgotten, and strange new ships were seen on the edge of the system, watchers from far empires drawn by the pulse the vault had sent out. But Elias and Sailari had no time for councils or thrones. They returned to the quiet garden atop the palace spire where the stars reflected in still pools, and for a long time they said nothing. Sailari held the dark crown in her lap, the metal cool and lifeless now, and asked if Elias felt different. He said yes, but not in a way he could explain. He saw more when he closed his eyes, heard echoes in silence, felt other thoughts brush against his own like shadows in the corner of a dream. The weave was still with him, even if the vault slept. That night a messenger arrived, an old man in plain robes who claimed to speak for the crownless, a hidden order of beings from many species who had long rejected empires, wars, and the rule of the strong. He said they had watched the rise and fall of great powers and chosen silence, exile, waiting for the one who would speak for the weave without trying to own it. He told Elias and Sailari they had awakened more than just ancient code. They had reopened a question long buried. Should power be shared or guarded? The messenger led them to a hidden chamber beneath the mountains beyond the city, where a circle of crownless waited, their faces hidden, their voices soft. Each had once worn power like a weapon and cast it aside. One was a former Vur commander, another a Terran diplomat who had faked her death, others too strange to name. They asked Sailari and Elias not to rule, but to choose to decide how the weave's knowledge should be released. Not all would accept it. Some would twist it, others would fear it. But to keep it locked away would be no different than the empires before. Selari asked what would happen if they refused, and the crownless said nothing at first. Then the eldest among them spoke. The vault chose you, but that choice means nothing without your own. For days, Elias walked the edges of the cities, watching people rebuild markets, clean broken streets, teach children how to grow food again. No one wore crowns. No one gave orders. Life went on, slow and uncertain. Selari spent time with the city healers, seeing how the weave's echoes in her mind gave her glimpses into pain and memory, how a word at the right moment could ease years of fear. They both saw what could happen if power was not twisted. But then came the warning ships arriving from the sovereign reach, a human-led dominion that had heard rumors of the vault and now demanded access. They sent envoys, spoke of trade and peace, but behind their words lay hunger. They brought a fleet just beyond orbit, cloaked in the name of protection. Elias knew their kind well. They wouldn't ask twice. The high houses began to stir again, calling for defense, for war, for crowns and commands. The crownless offered one last path. Erase the vault, bury its location, scatter its knowledge, let the weave return to silence. Let the galaxy forget. Elias stood at the edge of a great divide, open the weave and risk chaos, or close it and betray its gift. Selari placed the crown in his hands and said she would follow whatever choice he made, but it must be made freely. That night, under the stars, Elias sent a message, not to the sovereign reach, not to the high houses, but to every free network across the stars. It was not a speech of power or warning. He spoke of choice, of trust, of the weight of truth. He said the weave was not a weapon. It was a question, and that each world must decide its answer. Then he placed the crown on the ground and walked away. The next day the crown was gone. No one saw who took it. Some say it returned to the vault. Others believe it waits, still watching, still listening. The sovereign reach left soon after. Their ships met not with fire but with silence. The high houses crumbled slowly, their words no longer sharp. And in the years that followed, stories spread not of rulers, but of moments when strangers understood each other without speaking, when enemies paused before firing, when dreams became shared across impossible distances. The vault slept, but the weave had already awakened, and Elias, now only a name in old records, was remembered not as a king, not as a warrior, but as the first of the crownless to say no not to power, but to the need to own it. The stars above flickered like old memories as the galaxy slowly shifted, no longer held together by crowns, empires, or ancient rules, but by something new, fragile, and still unknown. And though the vault remained sealed and silent, its ripple continued to echo through every corner of space, changing minds, and opening paths where none had existed before. And in this silence, where power had once shouted, voices began to rise, not of leaders demanding control, but of people asking questions, reaching out, and daring to trust. Elias had vanished from public view, but stories of him lived on. Some calling him the Star Walker, others the Quiet Flame, though most simply remembered him as the man who walked away from the crown. Selari, too, had stepped away from her former life, choosing instead to move between distant colonies, not as royalty, but as a teacher and a healer, using her strange connection to the weave to help those who listened and even those who didn't. On the cold mining world of Telros 9, a worker with dreams of building schools for orphans found he could suddenly understand the thoughts of strangers in need. On a drifting refugee ship near the Vor border, a child spoke words no one had taught her, words from languages long forgotten, and brought peace between rival groups fighting over water. And on a lonely Terran outpost, a scientist who had once believed only in numbers began to hear songs from stars that helped him design machines to purify poisoned air. Across these strange changes came one truth. The weave was not just a system, it was awakening within the people themselves, not giving power but reminding them that they already held it. But not all accepted this. Some of the old factions clung to the past, trying to rebuild walls and titles, and in the ruins of the sovereign reach, a new leader rose, a man named Vale Kor, who claimed to be the rightful heir to the vaults, power, and promised to create an empire of order, free from the confusion the weave had brought. He gathered fleets, stirred old fears, and sent agents to silence the crownless before their ideas spread further. But the crownless had never been a group with borders or flags. They were miners, farmers, traders, even former soldiers who had seen too much and wanted only peace with dignity. They didn't build armies. They built bridges. Yet when Kor's ships came closer, threatening to crush the new harmony with fire, a call went out not for war, but for unity. From Elari Prime, where the gardens still glowed at night, Selari sent a message to every world that had touched the weave. She did not speak as a queen. She spoke as someone who had once worn a crown and now chose to listen instead. She called not for resistance, but for a gathering, a moment when all voices could be heard equally. On the moon world of Saren's light, thousands arrived not in warships, but in small craft, carrying nothing but hopes and ideas. It was the first conclave of equals, a council without titles where anyone could speak, and though it was chaotic and at times near collapse, it held. A Vru poet shared words that moved even her people's old enemies. A Terran mechanic offered designs to repair old trade routes. A young Elari with no name gave a speech that ended with tears in the eyes of war-hardened soldiers. The conclave was not perfect, but it was alive, and in that life a new kind of empire was born not of blood or birthright, but of shared purpose. They called it the Union of Equals. There were no rulers, only roles. No thrones, only circles. Every decision was debated, and every voice had weight. Some planets left, some joined later. But it grew. Kor, enraged by this rising force of words and dreams, launched a final campaign, sending 3 dreadnoughts toward the conclave's heart. But when they arrived, the ships were met not with weapons, but with silence and a message broadcast in every language. You are not our enemy. You are afraid. So are we. Let us be afraid together. The crews disobeyed Kor's orders. One by one, the ships powered down. Kor vanished soon after, and his movement collapsed, leaving behind only wreckage and warnings. Years passed. Children born after the vault's awakening grew up not knowing the feel of chains, only the sound of debate and shared dreams. The weave remained silent now, but in each person who had once touched it, something still glowed, a sense of connection that could not be stolen or silenced. On the 10th anniversary of the conclave, Elias returned, walking alone into the center of the gathering. His hair was gray now, his eyes older, but his voice remained calm and strong. He said little, only this: I believed once that power had to be refused. I see now that it must be shared. The weave was never a gift to one. It was a mirror held to all. He did not stay long, but the story of his return became a symbol, not of leadership, but of reminder that the path forward was not straight or easy, but it belonged to everyone willing to walk it. And so the empire of equals spread not in conquest, but in choice. From ice worlds to sunlit skies, people began to believe that the impossible was not power, it was peace with dignity. And in the quiet of night, beneath stars that still sang softly to those who listened, the weave watched, not as a ruler, but as a witness to something new, a galaxy where no crown was needed to be heard, and no voice too small to matter.